Looks like we're on. Good morning. My name's Jeff Cohen. This is the Topeka City Council Social Service Grants Committee. I'm the chair, and we also have Councilman Lesser, and Councilman Padilla should also be here. We're not sure, potentially.
I haven't heard anything other than that.
Okay, have not heard that he's not going to be here. So. I'll call this meeting to order, and first item up is to approve the minutes from September 19th.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes, minutes are approved. Okay, item number 3 is the discussion of outsourcing the grant process. And the reason why we're here is this is a burden for every council that we sit there and we try to grind through. How could you, like for example, one of the first times, the first years that I was on here, the Salvation Army's application was not very good, and it didn't qualify. And so through our committee process, they recommended that they approve the funding without including them because theirs fell below the line. And all of a sudden, how can you not support the Salvation Army? I mean, it's things like that. And so it's also an emotional decision too for the council. And so I thought when we started having these meetings, I thought, why don't we outsource this process and just have an unbiased entity do the review and score the applications, and then everybody has the same process. Everybody's familiar with how the process works. So we thought, well, let's go and talk to how the county does theirs. And then I think that's kind of where we left off. Is that kind of a rough of where we are here today? So, Councilman, any suggestions on discussion on that item?
No, at this point, I think I'd just go to visit with Sasha and see what she wanted to bring us up to speed from her perspective.
Certainly.
Sure. So thank you. So following the last meeting, we did a couple of different things. We contacted some agencies in the community that do this type of service and made a soft inquiry about pricing, and I've shared that information with you. Councilmember Lesser had some concerns about us making that super public. You know, if we were to go to an RFP process, we don't want to create an unfair advantage for anyone or disadvantage. And I would say there's, I guess, one exception to that around the agency that currently administers the county's grant funding. The information about the cost there is a public record, and I've provided that to you all. The contracts for both the aging dollars that the county makes available to the community, as well as their social service dollars. So you've got that information in a summary, as well as copies of the contracts that we were able to obtain. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of our perspective. It's going to be very difficult for us to understand exactly what the pricing options will be unless we go through an RFP process and see what folks propose. And at that point, you guys could negotiate a price, or staff could on your behalf, I guess is probably the appropriate way to say that. So really, in staff's mind at this point, you guys are at a point where you kind of need to make a decision whether you want to take this conversation to the governing body, because we, in order to take the next steps and move to an RFP process, you probably need a vote from your peers, from the group as a whole, to proceed in that direction and make a change to, we're not making a policy change as much as just the administration of it, but it's a big enough topic that you probably want to get a vote from the governing body to solidify that decision, and staff could move forward at that point. So for around that conversation, that's the information that we have for you guys to date. We've provided information on the cost estimates of staff working this process to kind of give you an idea of a price comparison, if so to speak. I don't disagree that this may remove some of that political pain for the governing body. It will also potentially be a little painful on the front side of that transition if the governing body chose that, because change is difficult. But I'm confident that we have good organizations in the community that could carry out this process for you, and it would still be the city's grant program. You wouldn't be giving away that program. Later on the agenda, you guys have your priority sheet that we do need to get to work on one way or the other, because this would still be a guiding document that the committee would want to continue to develop and review each year and provide that to your contractor if that was the direction that the governing body wanted to, that the group wanted to go. So it would still remain the city's program, but staff is supportive either way. If you want to keep it, if the decision is made to keep it in-house, we'll keep doing it. If you want to outsource it, we would support that decision as well.
What, through your evaluation and gathering of the information and the documents and documentation you provided to us, what recommendation do you have in regards to keeping it in-house or submitting it out for RFP?
I think it's very common for cities and counties to outsource it. You have a partner across the street, wrong street, that street, that does that. I came from the South Central Kansas area, and I can tell you that there weren't any cities that I'm aware of in that area or county, Sedgwick County and Wichita being the biggest cities or city in the state. They don't do this in-house. It's the same process. They contract with an agency in the community that is a grant-making agency, United Way or a community foundation, whatever, and it's administered through that third party because that's what they do. So I would recommend that you move forward with the discussion with the governing body.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cohen, I would make a motion at this point. I make a motion to send this to the governing body for this as a discussion item on a future agenda.
And would it be to include any specific recommendations on who a contractor would be or how that process would work or anything along those lines, or just generally speaking?
I think what would happen is it would get placed on the agenda, and all the information that we've talked about, we've been provided by Sasha and stuff, then would all be then given to the governing body, and the governing body then as a whole makes the decision based on that of whether we want to put it out for an RFP process, taking the next step, or whether or not the governing body is fine with the way it is right now. Would that be correct, Sasha, in how that would proceed?
Yes, that would, if.
Are we on a timeline for next year? I mean,
Absolutely.
It would be the following year.
This decision needs to be made one way or the other, because no matter which direction you go, we got to get started. Either we have to start an RFP process and select a vendor so that we can work with them on setting up the process, making sure that they understand your priorities and what the body wants for these, this grant program, or we need to get to work getting our application prepared and getting internally ready for that process, because it begins in early February. Yes. So, yeah, we are on a timeline, but I wish we had legal here. I think kind of somebody needs to make a second before you guys discuss, don't you? I'm sorry, point of order. I don't think I'm supposed to do that. Sorry.
Better if the decision is made now to start the process for next year, regardless, okay? Councilman?
Mr. Chair, I apologize for my tardiness.
I think we do need a second, though.
Yeah, and I was going to make the second.
Okay.
I apologize for my tardiness, but I would like to make the second, and as part of the discussion, just quickly, I'd like to ask just a couple questions
Sure.
of Sasha.
Absolutely.
But I do think it warrants a second.
Right,
Okay,
technically.
are you making the second?
I am.
Okay. Any more discussion on that?
Just a quick question. Sasha, in your evaluation of the agencies, I guess, who would be interested in doing this, do all of them, in your opinion, have the capacity to do this without any issue?
Yes, the two that, the two agents, the one that's administering the county's program clearly has capacity to administer a program similar to ours because they're doing it. The other that comes to mind, as you all know, we had one agency in the community that wouldn't be interested, but United Way would be the other one that comes to my mind that would be capable of doing this. I can't say that I'm an expert on their operations, but I believe that they have the capacity to do this. They make grants in hundreds of thousands of dollars throughout the year. So I believe they do.
And I ask that question because I'm sure that there will be some difference in costs that they might present to us, so that in choosing that organization, beyond just the price, I want to make sure that they have the capacity and staff and the ability to carry that out without any issue. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, would this be added to a December agenda or a January agenda?
I think we can add this to December, probably December 17th, because we'll need to put it on the preliminary agenda. The preliminary agenda is already out for the 3rd. So we're in a good spot to be able to consider this for December 17th, I would believe. You think that would make sense, wouldn't it, Sasha? To prepare documents, and you guys should be plenty of time to be able to prepare for the next, because even the next preliminary isn't out until next week. So 17th should be very doable.
If I can grab the agenda calendar before I commit and say, yeah, we can absolutely do that by the 17th, I'd like to look at the deadline. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just to
But
make sure.
my expectation.
But I think, yes, I believe we can.
Yeah, I believe we'll be able to. The deadlines are a little abnormal right now because of the holidays. We have to move deadlines up in order to make sure that it's out by Wednesday. But I think the deadline for the preliminary agenda is the first Thursday in December. It should where it should be, so that shouldn't be an issue to be able to put it together. And the good thing is all the documentation that Councilman Lesser is referring to, we've already produced for use. It would be a matter of copying it for the full body, so it's not like additional research time is needed. So, and I think the 17th agenda is light enough that we can put this on there.
Okay, thank you. Before we vote, should we see if there's any public comment? Yeah, let's do that. Is there anybody here that would like to speak?
I wasn't going to speak at first. I was just going to sit and listen and try to gather up as much as I could. But after the 3 days of council orientation that we've had and talking about the budget, talking about the challenges that we face with infrastructure, departments cutting, streamlining their budgets as much as possible, et cetera, the thought about outsourcing and not knowing what that amount is, but paying someone else to do the business of the city, to me, is not the best use of the taxpayers' money. After being involved in this in a very minimal level with the organizations since this past summer, I think that there are glitches that can be fixed in the system. I think obviously communication from all parties needs to be better, especially in the appeal process. But I think that we are going, you guys right now as the council before the new council is seated, are looking at a number of possible increases that citizens are going to have to pay for a number of things. And many of my constituency is older folks on fixed income, And to see that we are considering spending money and, by outsourcing something, to me is not the best way to go about it. If there are problems, we should be able to fix them. And I understand that I am a council-elect only, but we should be able to fix that. And we should also be tasked with doing our due diligence with answering the needs as we can in a professional way to these organizations that come to us. So that's it.
Is there anybody else that'd like to speak? All those in favor of recommending this to be added to the December 17th agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Item passes. Item number 4, update priorities.
So I have provided you with the priority sheet from last year. I did change the top year to 2021, so this will be setting the priorities for 2021. So each year, this committee looks this over and makes changes as sees fit. The dollar amounts on the bottom are the current budgeted amount for 2020, and so we just left that the same. But that's a discussion as well. So it's at your pleasure here.
Are there any questions on the priorities?
The only question I have is, these aren't listed in any, this is just a list of the priorities. This isn't a ranking of the priorities, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? On an item like this, do we ask for public comment? Is there anybody who'd like to speak on this item?
Nobody's seen it.
Well,
They have the priorities?
you guys don't have this sheet. I'm happy to make a copy for you if you'd like. We can do that. But the social service agencies that have been involved in this process each year, you've seen this. This is the same as last year's. It just, the only difference is that it says 2021 now. The dollar amounts are also probably different because the dollars would have been 2019's totals instead of 2020. So, but we can make copies for everybody that's here real quick. And yeah, you're welcome to take comments on this. I can't recall if that's normally what we do, but yeah, you absolutely can take comments. So, and you're right, this is not in any priority order.
Perfect.
On here. It's just all of them have equal priority in the system as it currently stands.
Okay.
I'd make a motion that we approve the priorities as stated in the document we received.
Is there a second?
I would second, but Ms. Hahn has made the offer to make the copies available to people here.
Can we recess for?
Well, I think fundamentally we still have to have a motion, then discussion can go after
Okay.
that. We can let them talk.
All right.
Otherwise, we just,
I'll give it a second then.
yeah.
Just for the purpose of discussion.
Yeah, for discussion.
Okay, and then we can just,
I'd say we take a
5-minute recess here until those documents are
Yeah, we'll
copied
get 'em
and
circulated.
distributed, and then we'll reconvene after that. Everybody has received the priority sheet document. Is anybody want to speak on that? Okay, sure. Come to the microphone.
I'm Kathy Votaw with LULAC, and I would just like to see or better understand a clarification of activities. There's a lot of programs that run out of the agencies. Activities encompasses activities. That could be drinking coffee. Programming is a whole different ballgame. And there's a lot more effort going into running various programs at these nonprofit agencies. So I would like to see that defined even further.
Okay. Is there,
So, I'm sorry.
I gave my copy away.
Oh, we can. Microphones, I get in trouble from the city or the TV people. Yeah, you guys can totally amend the language in here. To your point, Kathy, I don't think that was intentional. I think it probably is a language that's been in there forever, and we could come up with a little more clarified language like programming that supports seniors in the, something.
Well, I think it better, do I need to go back up there?
You do, because the mic, if we don't talk into the mics, which I love personally, they can't hear us on the recording, so.
So I believe that activities and programs are two different
Sure.
things. And you're going to get more results on a grant with programs than you are activities. I mean, it's easy to count every activity that someone comes to the senior center or the organization and has a cookie. Well, that's an activity. But if they are learning health and nutrition, the impact of the meal program is changing their lives, that's a program. And that needs to be noted, that there are some organizations, and myself included, that run programs along with activities.
The only thing I would point out here is if you read the, it says senior citizen-based programming. It's saying programming, and then it's just actually saying what type of activities are included in programming. It's not saying senior citizen neighborhood-based programming and activities. It's saying it has to be programming, and it's just saying your programming can include meals, activities, transportation, those different things. That would be the only thing I would point out. I mean, if I was going to eliminate it, something I would say just stop it at programming if that made people feel more comfortable. But I would assume at some point in time there was
it'd need to be a definition.
that it. But you see what I'm saying? We're not saying it's programming and activities. It's programming. But here's what can be included in programming, because I would imagine the reason that got there is at some point in time people didn't know. Our meals programming or transportation programming that would be my guess at some point in time is that's why they expanded that definition. But it
makes a huge difference, though, when you're writing a grant.
for
If you're only doing activities, or you are doing something else that. It has a lot of impact on a grant. And
what does?
If you're just doing activities, maybe it just needs to be expanded. I mean, that was just my suggestion.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I'm getting. What I'm saying is it's program. It says it has to be programming. It's then just saying that your program can include these various things. I assume probably at some point in time, transportation wasn't deemed as programming, so they went and added that to expand the definition. I mean, that's the only reason I'm saying.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I would tend to agree with Mr. Lesser. I think if you get into activities and start trying to list everything that might be there, that could be a long list. And I think in writing your grant, Kathy, that under programming, you can list out those things that you think are the priority in programming, and not get caught up in the tick marks of how many people came to have a cookie, but actually as part of the nutrition program, these numbers of participants took part, and this is the result. And I think that would cover what you're trying to give importance to, which I think is the right thing to do.
And I think you're exactly right. If it had said neighborhood-based programming and activities, I completely agree with you.
Okay. Thanks.
So do we want to strike, do we want to stop at programming, kind of similar to how you have programs for at-risk youth a couple below it, or are we leaving it?
I think we leave it, I
Okay.
think that we leave it as it is because it then at least eliminates the question, are meals program, can meals be part of programming, can activity, I think transportation, I think you just leave it as it is.
Anybody else like to speak to this item? Yep.
Good morning, Karen Streeter with SLI. I think that my question would be directed to your last paragraph on the priorities. And I'd just really like to have some better understanding of kind of what that looks like. Because when I read this, it really does interpret to me that organizations that have not applied in the past, the chance of receiving funding is pretty low based upon what appears to be grandfathered organizations. So I just kind of like to understand how new organization applications are taken into consideration. Because priorities do change from year to year, and the ability of existing organizations to respond to those changes well. So I would just love to have some clarity on that if I could.
Sasha?
Yeah, happy to answer that. So the new untested programs section is fairly new. We didn't originally have that section. It was added around a conversation that the council had about new agencies coming in that we have no track record with. And because before you could apply for up to $25,000, and this is a very competitive program, and so the committee at that time felt like we should make new agencies, untested programs, I'm sorry, because that's been a sticking point in the past. So it's not about the agency, it's about the program, but new programs should have to prove themselves before they get to apply for the whole enchilada, basically, is where that came from. There are 2 agencies that are grandfathered in, you are correct, and they do get more. There's a history around that, and I'll get to that next, but those are they are not mutually exclusive.
So an untested program, SLI has been serving the community for 48 years. Is that an untested program if we would apply? Since we have a history with.
An untested program, according to our administration of the program, is one that we have not funded before.
Gotcha. Okay. So really, you will consider new applications
Absolutely.
fairly. It's just if one is funded, they're going to be funded at a lower amount until they're able to demonstrate ability to perform as
Yes.
expected.
In year 1,
Okay.
you would
Gotcha.
be at a lower amount, and then you meet all your outcomes and outputs as you described in your grant application, and then in year 2, when you apply, then that cap is removed because now you're tested.
Gotcha. It
Correct?
makes sense to me. I just wanted
Okay.
clarity.
Yes, that's correct.
Very good. Okay.
So the 2 agencies that are grandfathered, I'll quickly try to explain how we got to that point. There didn't used to be a cap on how much you could apply for, and as this process has evolved, and we've tried to refine it each year to make it more objective and a score-based selection system that is solely based on the merits of the application and the performance of the program in the community, and tried to move away from those subjective decision-making kind of methods that historically this grant program has been entrenched in. We found that as we were changing the scoring system to try to, again, make it objective, the agencies were reacting because they're all very smart and were just increasing the dollar amounts that they were applying for because basically they figured out our scoring system on the front side. And you can't knock them for that at all. So the committee at that time felt that the appropriate thing to do would be to set a cap on the max that they could apply for. And during that discussion, we had a very lengthy discussion with these 2 agencies, and they've since come every year and explained to the new committee why those funding amounts are so vital. I can't speak with the knowledge and expertise that either one of these executive directors of these agencies could. And if you guys are interested in hearing that firsthand, staff had anticipated making that request today. Do you want to hear from them? And if so, we'll schedule that at the next meeting. But these services have been deemed each year by the committee, after listening to the arguments of why those funding levels are so important. Each year the committee has said yes. This program is so vital to the populations that it serves which are at-risk populations in our community, that we support their right to keep that $50,000 amount for the Shawnee Medical Society and $35,000 for Positive Connections. So that's been a policy decision that's made basically every year by this committee based on those services that are provided. And these two agencies, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm about to lie, are the only two in the community that are providing the type of service that they're providing. Shawnee Medical Society provides medical care and prescription assistance for folks that are in the donut hole of insurance world, where they are not making enough to afford to pay for their own insurance, but they don't qualify, or they're not working for an employer that offers them insurance, so they're stuck. And they have no options for insurance, and this provides medical care for chronic medical conditions that you can die from if you don't have, like insulin, if I'm diabetic. That's the type of program that is. Is that okay? Because they do such a good job. They're both ladies are so eloquent in describing their programs. And then, of course, Positive Connections provides services to folks in the community that are living with HIV and AIDS, and I do believe that they're the only ones providing that service as well. So that's what those policy decisions have been made on, to keep these funding amounts. And again, we're happy to bring those folks in and have them tell you firsthand why this funding amount is so critical to their program. And
I think that would be helpful in doing so. My advice, though, would be, since we probably have one more meeting, if any, prior to the end of the year, and then the new committee is going to be assigned, I would say probably it would be more beneficial to make sure that that's done with. If Mr. Padilla and I are on it, then obviously we would hear it then, but whoever, we can at least have one new member, so.
Well, yes, and to your point, Councilmember Lesser, you guys should really have this finalized by the 17th when we go to the council with your recommendation on outsourcing, because this will still be a piece of that.
Right.
And your peers on the governing body that have participated in this process are going to ask about this. Okay, well, what about the priorities? Are we keeping the control of the priorities, and what did you guys come up with on that? So I know this is super tight turnaround, but we could probably get another one of these meetings scheduled before the 17th if we're nimble in doing so. I mean, we would have to probably do that today so that we can get everything lined out in terms of identify the date. Clearly, next week is a holiday week, but then we have that first week of December that we could schedule a meeting for this committee, get those ladies in here so that you can hear from them, and then finalize this so that we can be ready for the council meeting on December 17th.
Certainly.
On the two that have been grandfathered in, the Shawnee Medical Society and Positive Connections, how long have they been receiving money? Do we know?
How long have they been funded by the city of Topeka?
Right.
Oh, yeah, there you go. And they're still, to be clear, they still have to go through the application process.
So you have to look at their metrics, and you have to see how many they've served, and if those numbers are dwindling or increasing, or
Yes,
all
ma'am.
of that.
They go through that same process that all of the other agencies go through. Their application is scored. They must score at that minimum score level, just like everybody else. The only difference is that they are allowed to apply for more than the $25,000 cap that everyone else is capped at, basically. So absolutely, they go through the same scrutiny that all of the other agencies that are funded go through.
And do they usually apply for that max amount, the
Yes, they do.
50,000 and the
Yes, they do.
35,000?
And actually, is this, so for 2020, Positive Connections applied for $35,000, and they were awarded $35,000, correct? Did they get? Yeah. And then
The
Shawnee
same.
County Medical Society applied for 50.
They got 49,000.
And
They got
those,
49?
those dollar amounts are based on the score of their application. That the amounts that they're granted is tied to their score. It's a formula, a function of the score that they receive.
And if by some chance they, let's just say hypothetically, they would score lower one year than another, would that 25 to 50, so might they one year get, if the score is a little bit lower, get maybe 39 instead of 50,000,
Absolutely.
et
The
cetera?
way that the scoring system works is that the dollar amount that's granted to the agency is a function of the score that they receive. So if I apply for $50,000 and I receive an 88 on my application, then I get 88% of what I'm applying for, correct? Yeah. So it's totally tied to their performance on the application for every agency.
Okay, thanks.
Have either of you, council people, served on the Shawnee Medical Society Board at 7 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. or you have?
I do. 7.
Councilman, what would you like to do about the update priorities?
I think there's a motion and a second pending right now to approve.
Okay. All those in favor to send the priorities document to the council, say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, priorities will be sent. Are there any other items before the committee?
Do you want to hear from Shawnee County Medical Society and Positive Connections? Because we will need to schedule that if you do. And again, I realize that you just approved this document, but we kind of left that conversation there. It's up to you guys.
I
No
think it
pressure.
would, my point was, I think it would be helpful for if we did that after the first of the year. I personally,
The next.
I've heard them. So I
Okay.
don't need to hear them.
Yeah, I
I
would
think
agree.
I think they'll all have the same question as to why they're grandfathered in, and just
The
as
new
we all
committee
did.
members. Got it. Okay, very good.
So I think
Thank you.
that they'll reach out to them early in the year.
Perfect.
Take care of that. Again, is there any other items before the committee? And the committee's adjourned.